Hey lunatics, it's Lady Luna, and today I'm talking about such a great topic, what it's like to actually have a spiritual awakening. I have had a spiritual awakening myself that was involved in a lot of heavy things like religious deconstruction from the religion I'd been in for 32 years of my life, and also finding esotericism, finding the spirituality that made me literally the happiest I'd ever been. So I wanted to go over that process with you guys because you've probably seen the memes right now of like everyone saying what a what a spiritual awakening is actually like, which is like, you start meeting your shadow self and you start realizing all the generational trauma that you may have been going through, or all the things from your past that cause you to have bad habits now, and all the darker sides of yourself start coming up because a spiritual awakening can involve a lot of unexpected shadow work, a lot of unexpected digging into your past of painful things that have happened. So, I wanted to show that yes, those are a huge part of a spiritual awakening, but there's also much, much more to a spiritual awakening than that. A lot of it is very happy, a lot of it is very confusing, and a lot of it is painful. But the painful part is like, I think of it like adding pressure to a piece of coal to the point where it makes a diamond. The pain has a purpose. And it's not like, the more painful, the better. But everyone goes through a certain level of pain and a certain level of euphoria and a certain level of, like I said, confusion, trying to figure their way through this whole thing. That's all very normal when having a spiritual awakening. So, I would say the first thing that you experience at the very start of a spiritual awakening is a desire for truth over feelings. And this is really important, especially if you are deconstructing from a religion the way that I did. A lot of people that have a spiritual awakening do so because they first realize that religion is a very literalist institution that we have in society, no matter what organized religion it is. There are so many things about religion that teach you to just accept certain things without questioning. And the more we do that, the less logic and rationality we have toward the rest of life. I've heard a quote before that was said a little more in a crass way, but I'll tone it down for YouTube. They said, when you're brought up to believe in stupid crap, the more stupid crap you'll believe. As in, like, you'll be willing to fall for a lot of scams and things like that. And I have seen that in religious communities. So when you start questioning, you suddenly realize you have this desire to know what's true, regardless of your feelings. Religion tends to be a very feelings-based type of system where they tell you to pray and then just see how you feel. And then how you feel is what God is saying to you, or what the angels are telling you, or things like that. When in reality, all we're doing is tapping into our subconscious mind. I still believe that prayer done in a different way, like prayer where you're not looking toward something outside of yourself for help, but looking inward. There is a type of prayer that's like that. It's more like meditation and affirmations and things. But where you can tap into your subconscious mind and learn to change it for the better. That's the type of prayer that I like. So when you're searching for truth, the next thing is you start questioning everything that you've ever known, everything you've ever been taught, whether it's what you eat, what you wear, politics, obviously religion, your friend group, people in your family. You question everything. Especially things in the media. You start not believing everything you see anymore. And especially with religious deconstruction, something that happens next is you start researching like crazy. This was big for me because I already loved to research ever since about college age. I really got into looking up cited sources for things because I got tired of people telling me these weird things, especially spiritual things or whatever, that they were expecting me to just take it at face value, and they would sound a little out there, or I would research things, I would look up studies. I learned how to look up studies that were credible, and it really made a difference. It made me start thinking in a completely different way where I actually could find evidence for things or just proof for things, rather than just believing what people told me, or especially buying into the arguments where it was like, well, you're going to go to hell if you don't have faith in this, or something like that. Fear, believe it or not, can turn off the logic part of your brain. If you are afraid, it puts your brain into fight or flight mode where you don't have time. Your body and your mind feel like you don't have time to think through it. So you just automatically go toward the initial reaction that you have. So, for example, when you see things on the news that are really scary, we all just believe it a lot of the time because they present it in such a frightening way. Whereas if we were to sit and think about it, a lot of times the news, I find as I get older, the news isn't entirely accurate all the time. In fact, sometimes they've been very wrong because reporters are just people, and a lot of times they are fallible, they make mistakes, or perhaps they have an agenda sometimes, because news stations need to keep their ratings up. Everyone gets their news from Twitter now. So, part of the process of having a spiritual awakening is learning not to just believe everything you hear. In fact, even when you start finding more spiritual beliefs that you do like, you learn to question those too. And that way you're refining things using logic and reason and intuition. I think intuition is still important, but you're using all of those together in order to find actual truth and not just something that feels good. So at least that's how it is for me. Another strange thing that happens actually during a spiritual awakening is you want to be alone more. Even if you hadn't been an introvert before, I've always been an introvert. But even then, I found I wanted to be alone even more than I did before. And it's mainly so that you can hear yourself think. When you're around so many people, when you're in the outside world, when you have so many things on screens around you all day telling you things, telling you what to think, at some point you need time to sit and actually marinate in your own thoughts so that you can process things. You need time to process all this new information that you're learning and that you are implementing into your life. A spiritual awakening can involve so many changes in not only your thinking, but who you perceive yourself to be. And it can have so many changes in even how you appear to other people. So I would say don't become a hermit, but do allow yourself to have that alone time that you need to process things. Have some me time. It's okay to do that. It's not a selfish thing. Another thing that happens, and this is very true with me, you sometimes in a spiritual awakening are afraid to share your findings with other people. So if you start finding out information about religious things or whatever it may be that led you to your spiritual awakening, you're going to start rehearsing how you're going to tell people these things, especially your family, your friends, your spouse, or your significant other, because you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to sound crazy. These things are not the norm. These things are not things that most people talk about. Let's face it, most people want to talk about small talk. Most people want to talk about who's dating who. They want to talk about drama at work. They want to talk about reality TV shows like the Kardashians or something like that. And here's the thing. Talking about those things isn't like some kind of sin or some kind of bad thing. It's okay to have moments like that where you have small talk or you watch a reality TV show or something. That doesn't make you a bad person or a stupid person or an unenlightened person. But when it's something that you do all the time without really thinking about it, it's harder to develop that desire for truth. It's harder to go through a spiritual awakening if that's all that you do. So when you are going through a spiritual awakening and you're surrounded by people who only want to do those things, they might look at you like you're kind of crazy. What I got a lot of was, well, why do you care so much about this? And I got a lot of people saying, well, no one ever is really going to know the answer to anything in the universe, so why even question, right? I got that especially from religious people. They said, well, none of us will really know what happens after we die. No one will really, and that surprised me so much, because you would think that, especially the people in my religion, were very into what would happen after you die and very concerned with getting to heaven and things like that. But when I had questions about what goes on in heaven, who God's father was, where God even comes from, and if God has a father, who was the first God, and how did he appear, and all this stuff, no one could answer my questions. And these are some of the things that happened. I would want to ask people and have conversations about these things, and people would shut me down because they didn't know. And when you're having a spiritual awakening, you start to let go of a lot of cognitive dissonance, where you just can't have cognitive dissonance. For those who don't know, is where you have two different thoughts competing in your mind at once, and it makes you frustrated. It makes you very angry because you want to hold on to the option that is most comfortable for you and that you've always known, and not this new one that's coming in. And when you have a spiritual awakening, you start to have less of that conflict, less of that cognitive dissonance, whereas other people are still holding on to theirs because they haven't even thought about that kind of thing yet. So another thing that happens is you meet your shadow self, as I mentioned before. You start realizing your bad habits. You start realizing generational cycles that may have contributed to certain things in your personality or your habits. You may realize that some people realize they're neurodivergent, such as having ADHD or high functioning autism perhaps, or things like that they never even realized before. They start going to therapy if they had never gone before. I was one of those people. I felt like I needed some help in sorting out my thoughts, and that's something I highly suggest doing, especially during a spiritual awakening. And you're not going to therapy in order to necessarily talk about spiritual things. You're going in order to help sort out any depression that comes up, any anxiety, any other stuff that you're just dealing with from your past, because it can be so heavy. And I don't hear a lot of people recommend that for a spiritual awakening, but having a therapist to talk to and just get your feelings out to somebody who knows how to help you is very helpful. Even just to hear yourself talk to someone about your problems helps you process it. So, meeting your shadow self can be scary, but it is so beneficial, especially if you keep a journal during that time. When you can look back on journal entries of how you were a month ago or 5 months ago or whatever, and see how far you've come in your journey, it's so helpful and helps you feel so much better. Another thing that happens during a spiritual awakening is you start to change your habits and your lifestyle a lot of the time. So some people start dressing differently. Some people may have a totally different appearance. Some don't. I wouldn't say I look completely different now, but I do have a more relaxed look than I did before. I used to never leave the house without makeup because I was extremely self-conscious about my looks. I used to never wear my hair in a ponytail because I thought that it made me look fat, as weird as that sounds. Things like that. And after my spiritual awakening, I didn't care anymore what people thought of my appearance. I want to look presentable and look my best and have good hygiene and things. But I stopped caring about people judging me. I stopped caring about what people might be thinking about me as they see me walk down the street or something. And other things are, some people change their diet when they go through a spiritual awakening. A few years ago, veganism was big. I used to be vegan. I was vegan for, I would say, 8.5 years. And I do have a video as to why I stopped being vegan, if you're interested in that. And I'll put a link to it somewhere here. But other people choose other types of healthy diets because you start realizing that your body is a temple. You realize that as we're going through different incarnations, because a lot of people kind of have this awakening to past lives and things like that during a spiritual awakening, you realize how important your body is because you're in this life for a reason. You're not just some robot going through life mindlessly and aimlessly. You are here to self-actualize. You're here in order to become the best version of yourself. And I'm someone who believes in moksha, which means that you can reach the end of your reincarnation cycle or your cycle of death and rebirth. And this involves enlightenment and also karma and other things. And if you want to know more about that, check out my memberships videos because I have a video on how to become enlightened if you're interested. Another thing that happens during a spiritual awakening is you go through all the stages of grief and not necessarily in a linear fashion. So, you may go from the start of it to the end of it to the middle, it's like a spectrum and you keep going like this. And you do get over it. It does end. The stages of grief do end. Anger is a huge thing that you deal with, especially in the beginning. If you're deconstructing from a religion or you're just frustrated because you're noticing the injustices in society or things like that, that can make you so angry because you're like, why aren't we talking about this more? Why are people not doing anything about this? And why aren't we spreading the word about this more? Why am I the only one who cares? And as long as you are continuing to unfold things and learn new things and research new things on your spiritual journey, the anger will subside and you'll realize, hey, I shouldn't be angry because someone is doing something about it and it's me. Just by setting an example for other people of peace and friendship and compassion and empathy that you develop during this journey helps the world so much. And I like the quote, let's see if I can remember it off the top of my head. I can't do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that I can do. I really love that quote so much. It's one of my favorites, and it's so true. So you become slower to anger. That's something that's happened with me. Doesn't mean you never get angry anymore, but you do become slower to anger. You start to get control over your emotions because that's part of this whole thing. It's once you learn to control your subconscious mind, you're able to control your emotions so much more easily. So you start to become more compassionate. As time goes on, usually you start wanting to put yourself in other people's shoes more often, whereas before you kind of just brush it off like, that person's stupid, or, that person's not like me. They're in one of those groups, things like that. There's less exclusivity between you and other people, and you start seeing that other people really are you, and you are other people. You're all just one consciousness. They may be in different bodies, and they may be having different experiences than you do, but really everyone is just you because we all come from the same source. That's what a lot of people realize on their spiritual journey. So here's one of my favorite ones that happens during a spiritual awakening. You have random aha moments. So you'll be just walking around like doing your, making some breakfast in the morning or something. You'll just realize the deepest thing that you have never thought of. And these things come to you. And I don't mean in a magical way. I mean, as you're putting things together, as you're processing things you're researching, people that you're talking to, like, because you talk to a lot of new and different people. You meet new, different friends on your spiritual journey. And as you're processing all of this, you start to put the puzzle pieces together in your mind and realize, oh, That's the answer to that question that I've had for years, or things like that. And they're not really moments that you can plan, but they're so much fun when you just like, I can't tell you how many times this happens almost every day now, where you're just like, just randomly in your day. And that sounds silly, it sounds made up, but it's so true. And it's important to also journal about those moments as well and look back on those. So, in the end, yes, you go through all these things, you go through your ups and your downs during your spiritual awakening, but at the end, and I'm going to just say there is no actual end to spiritual awakenings or enlightenment or things like that. But at the end of the hardest parts, I will say, you're going to feel more fulfilled than you ever have. You're going to feel happy. You're going to feel self-actualized. You're going to feel like you're becoming or embodying the best version of yourself. And honestly, that is how I feel now. And if I could help even just one person achieve that, it would be worth it to me, because I have been on such a strange journey this past year. If you watch my channel, I lost both my parents. In 2021, I lost my mom. And this year, 2022, I lost my dad. Both to terminal illnesses. I had to take care of my dad during that time, and a lot of really, really difficult things happened during that, and it was the hardest time, literally, of my entire life. But during that time, I was having my spiritual awakening. I was deconstructing from religion, which led me into questioning and wanting to know more about the universe, existence, wanting to define what reality actually is, why we're here, because the spiritual system that was given to me from basically birth had fallen apart. And I realized it wasn't true, and I had to find out what was true. And for like a good solid 2 weeks, I was atheist, which I don't have anything against atheists. I think they partially understand the truth that the biblical God is not true, that there is no true religion, and that there's a lot of silly charlatans out there. Like, atheists see that, but I wanted something beyond just the material world, because spirituality just makes sense to me. I can see that consciousness is a thing. It's a true, real thing. It's probably the only real thing that exists. And so after I went through all this, I literally felt happier knowing what was true finally. And still, it's not like I know everything now. You still go on this journey of learning more and more and more every day, and you get hungry for it. The people who go through spiritual awakenings are curious people. They're people who have questions always, and that never ends. It's not like one day it's like, oh, I'm done. I'm done having a spiritual awakening now. You're always awakening after that. Your awakening continues until the day you die, and even past that, I think. And that's why we have multiple lives, is because we're always unfolding until we're able to reach moksha. I'm hoping this is my last incarnation. That's my goal. But going through a spiritual awakening is something I would wish for anyone and everyone, because it helps you become the best version of yourself and become happier than you've ever been, at least if you do it the way I did. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and that it somehow helps you on your own journey. And please feel free in the comments to share what your experiences are with a spiritual awakening if you've had one. And thank you so much for watching, you guys, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.